All right, English 9. Here's what we did. Today is Thursday, the 13th of March. Your entry task is based on what we learned yesterday from Georgia O'Keeffe. What do you think of Georgia O'Keeffe's art? What about her attitude? Would you have liked to know her? Why or why not? I like or don't like her art because I think she is blank and would or wouldn't be nice to know or would be difficult to know. Don't like her attitude because, anyway, that entry task is in Google Classroom. And if you click this, you can see some of her 294 paintings. It's got lovely, soothing music in the background. Anyway, we just ran that during the entry task. So we picked up with the part that we read yesterday, Georgia O'Keeffe by Joan Didion. That's a link, but I'm going to go ahead and go into my document here. So we left off somewhere in here yesterday, but I'm going to go ahead and pick up with roughly in here. So watch yesterday's video if you want to get started. My daughter was making, that day in Chicago, an entirely unconscious but quite basic assumption about people and the work they do. She was assuming that the glory she saw in the work reflected a glory in its maker, that the painting was the painter as the poem is the poet, that every choice one made alone, every word chosen or rejected, every brushstroke laid or not laid down betrayed one's character. Style is character. It seemed to me that afternoon that I had rarely seen so instinctive an application of this familiar principle, and I recall being pleased not only that my daughter responded to style as character, but that it was Georgia O'Keeffe's particular style to which she responded. This was a hard woman who had imposed her 192 square feet of clouds on Chicago. So she is pleased with Georgia O'Keeffe's personality and style. So she enjoys her artwork. Hardness has not been in our century a quality much admired in women, nor in the last 20 years has it even been in official favor for men. When hardness surfaces in the very old, we tend to transform it into crustiness or eccentricity, some tonic pepperiness to be indulged at a distance. On the evidence of her work and what she has said about it, Georgia O'Keeffe is neither crusty nor eccentric. She is simply hard, a straight shooter, a woman clean of received wisdom and open to what she sees. She's very no nonsense. She says what she thinks. She doesn't care what other people think. So make sure you're at least highlighting what I have in here and put in highlights and notations, because these are the quotes that are going to be the most important when you come to write your essay. This is a woman who could early on dismiss most of her contemporaries as dreamy, and would later single out one she liked as a very poor painter, and then add, apparently, by way of softening the judgment, I guess he wasn't a painter at all. He had no courage, and I believe that to create one's own art, to create one's own world in any of the arts takes courage. This is a woman who in 1939, and this is basically saying that she believes that to create one's own art requires courage. I don't know that we need she's worried about the other guys thing, but anyway, there we go. Oops, I just didn't mean to do that. Control Z. All right. This woman, who in 1939 could advise her admirers that they were missing her point, that her appreciation of her famous flowers was merely sentimental. When I paint a red hill, she observed coolly in the catalogue for an exhibition that year, you say it is too bad that I don't always paint flowers. A flower touches almost everyone's heart. A red hill doesn't touch anyone's heart. This is a woman who could describe the genesis of one of her most well-known paintings, the cow skull, red, white, and blue, owned by the Metropolitan, as an act of quite deliberate and derisive orneriness. She basically did this to kind of flip people off. She's intentionally attempting to, she's doing it to be ugly, kind of. I thought of the city men I had been seeing in the East, she wrote. They talked so often of writing the great American novel, the great American play, the great American poetry. So, as I was painting my cow's head on blue, I thought to myself, I'll make it an American painting. They will not think it great with red stripes down the side. red, white, and blue, but they will notice it. So she wants people to notice her artwork. Doesn't care if they like it. Doesn't care if they like her, but wants people to see her artwork. The city men, the men, they. The words crop up again and again as this astonishingly aggressive woman tells us what was on her mind when she was making her astonishingly aggressive paintings. Her art speaks for herself, and she doesn't care if it's negative. And anyway, her art, she cares what she thinks. It was in these city men who stood accused of sentimentalizing her flowers. I made you take time to look at what I saw, and when you took time to really notice my flower, you hung all your associations with flowers on my flower. And you write about my flower as if I think and see what you think and see, and I don't. Imagine those words, and I don't, spoken, and the sound you hear is, don't tread on me. She's salty, she's tough, she's aggressive. Her work represents who she is. There she is sticking her middle finger out at him again. Also this was a time of Sigmund Freud, and a lot of people accused her artwork of being of female body parts. And basically what she's saying here is that that's your problem. I painted a flower. What you see is on you, and that's not what it is. The men believed it impossible to paint New York. So Georgia O'Keeffe painted New York. The men didn't think much of a bright color, so she made it brighter. The men yearned toward Europe, so she went to Texas and New Mexico. Again, whatever people want, she's doing the opposite. She's contrary. The men talked about Cezanne. Long, involved remarks about the plastic quality of his form and color, and took one another's long, involved remarks in the view of this angelic rattlesnake in their midst altogether too seriously. I can paint one of those dismal colored paintings like the men. And she did, by the way. The woman who regarded herself as always an outsider remembers thinking one day in 1922, and she did. The painting of a shed, all low-toned and dreary with the tree beside the door. She called the act of rancor. Rancor is pretty much bitterness, so she painted this very much on purpose to kind of flaunt in their faces and make them... Anyway, the shanty, and hung it in her next show. The men seemed to approve of it, she reported 54 years later, her contempt undimmed. So she really didn't think much of them at all, even 54 years later. They seemed to think that maybe I was beginning to paint. That was my only low-toned, dismal-colored painting. Outsider of the alienation. I'm going to take that out. That's all good. All right, so... This is the best quote in the whole thing. Some women fight and others do not. Like so many successful guerrillas in the war between the sexes, Georgia O'Keeffe seems to have been equipped early with an immutable sense of who she was and a fairly clear understanding that she would be required to prove it. This is a golden quote because she knows who she is, which is interpersonal intelligence, and she knows how hard it will be to be herself, which is determination. She's just going to do it all. So those two things, golden quote. I will let you read the rest of this, but again, didn't much care. People painted over her pictures and tried to teach her how to do. She didn't care. Went on to insult her, and eventually, but anyway, read it. But those, I don't have more annotations in there. 10 watercolors were made from the star. 10 watercolors were made from that star. In class, we talked about how that is possibly showing... Maybe that's the beginning of her career, and maybe that was the path she intended to follow and did. But when people repeat things, there is a reason for it. Next, we wanted to plug some stuff in the graphic organizer, which we did. So this is all in Google Classroom again. Georgia O'Keeffe, here's the claim. Georgia O'Keeffe was very self-aware and determined and deserves respect for what she accomplished. The audience may be critics of Georgia O'Keeffe, artists, art enthusiasts, maybe her daughter. Her purpose is to persuade the reader that Georgia O'Keeffe is a talented artist and deserves respect. Point of view is as a mother, an art enthusiast. Intelligence is focused on, not creative so much, but it is mentioned. She is creative. Her interpersonal knowledge, she knows herself well. Determination and perseverance are her other intelligence. The quote, but this is your golden quote again. Put it right in here. Georgia O'Keeffe seems to have been equipped early with an immutable sense of who she was and a fairly clear understanding that she would be required to prove it. And then you'll need a second quote. I put this one in, but there's plenty other, even better. There's maybe some better ones about her being a straight shooter. Maybe that to create one's own world in any of the arts takes courage is a good one. Maybe that's the one I put in there, astonishingly aggressive, don't tread on me. Those are all possibilities to put in there, and that is where we mostly left off. So I hope that helps, and I'll see y'all tomorrow.